There is something ominous about this landscape that has been stuck in my mind since before this series started.
On June 4th, 1963, Robert Domingos and Linda Faye Edwards were ambushed and murdered by gun here at Gaviota Beach. Welcome to Episode 4 of the Zodiac Files. Robert Domingos, age 18, Linda Edwards, age 17. Robert was born on May 12th, 1945, while Linda was born on June 7th of the same year. Robert was a star player on the Lompoc High School football team in the guard position. He was also vice president of the Future Farmers of America, and he was from a family of ranchers. Now, what is interesting about this cold case here is that they did not tell anybody where they were going when they left about noon. Linda had invited her best friend, Shirley Janessa, but she could not attend due to her fiance having to work. Now, given it was senior ditch day, the rest of their class went to a beach south of here at Goleta Beach. It was 2 days from their high school graduation and 3 days from Linda's birthday. Bobby and Linda are ambushed here by the killer, who is wearing gloves, and he may have held them at knife point. In my opinion, this is very similar to the Zodiac's Lake Berryessa canonical attack, and that is due to the fact that he first has the female tie up the male with an old style type clothesline rope material, and then possibly secures Bobby himself. Now, due to the fact that Linda is found with the top of her bathing suit cut by knife, I think that whatever transpired may have triggered Bobby due to the bruises found on his fists, may have attacked and stunned the killer, and that's where things went wrong. When the victims turn and run up this creek bed over here to my right, they're shot in the back. Linda may have been the first shot to her back, which was non-fatal, then her right leg is shattered. After that, the killer then fires at point-blank range, leaving some burn marks on the bodies, and also this could possibly be a .22 rifle indicated by Detective Bill Baker, and we will insert a video of him talking about the case here. We will also insert the article theorizing that the killer may have been injured during the attack. Now, given that this was a daylight attack, in my opinion, if this was indeed the Zodiac Killer, if he did not have the black hooded mask from Lake Berryessa, he may have used a more primitive bag-style mask, a la the Texarkana Phantom from the Texarkana Moonlight murders. When the killer flees the scene, he does leave boot prints in the sand, which again is very similar, and an additional Lake Berryessa parallel. The crime scene breakdown with ex-retired Navy gunner's mate Brian, former small arms instructor. We're going to pick back up at June 5th, the next day, after Robert's father, George Domingos, aka nickname Hutch, fired a missing persons report. What happens is up here past the train tracks and the highway, Robert's 1957 Pontiac was seen up there. Then Janessa, who was 19 at the time, they spot CHP officer Paul Schultz, lead him down the pathway here using a single flashlight. So we're going to go over to Brian with our crime scene breakdown.
So Lee, Hutch, and Patrolman Schultz comes down the trail, and Lee says, the shack is right up this creek a bit. So the patrolman says, wait here, we'll be back, I'll be back in a second. He takes the only flashlight up there. It's getting about 9:30 in the evening, so it's getting dark. He walks up there and he finds their bodies. Comes back and says, don't go up there.
So the scene inside of the shack is that Bobby's on the bottom with Linda on top. Linda is found with a towel over her face. Supposedly, this story goes back and forth, but there's debris and leaves gathered around the shack with expired matches, and then it was theorized that the killer attempted to light the shack on fire as a funeral pyre but the blanket on the outside of the shack did not catch. Apparently, I believe this is per J.B. Averitt, that law enforcement does know the size of the boot prints found at the scene. We'll insert a video with J.B.'s interview here.
So they found Robert and Linda in the shack. Robert was shot 11 times, all in the upper torso, and Linda was shot 8 times, once in the leg and 7 times in the upper torso.
Yep. So as we said, the reason the bodies were stacked is because the shack was very small, so they would not have fit next to each other side by side. There were no fingerprints recovered at the shack. There was also blood drops and hair mixed into the creek bed and blood drops on the rocks. So there's quite a bit of forensic material spread around the scene. It's theorized that the killer may have left in quite a hurry due to the fact that even expending the matches, he didn't stick around to make sure that the blanket or tarp, I've seen multiple, did not actually catch and light the shack on fire.
Also, inside the creek bed, they found 20 expended cartridges from a .22 long rifle. So, out of all the bullet wounds, there's only 1 round missing. My theory is that when the killer shot at Linda, he hit her twice, and the 3rd time he missed. But it was enough to stop her, and then he finished the first magazine off with Robert running and stopped them both, then ran up there and shot him point blank range with reloaded 10 rounds with 5 rounds apiece into each body.
So the expended casings do show that the killer stopped and reloaded over the bodies?
So one of the theories was that they could not escape this way towards the ocean. So they were trying to go back up towards the car, which would have been going up the creek bed to the cattle tunnel, which was up there. So I think that the killer was either hiding in the tunnel or in the shack. It was called the George Gill Shack. It was the size of 2 porta potties put together. George Gill was interviewed and he had an alibi, but a week before or so, there was a sniper report shooting both north of here and south of here, and with the .22 rifle, the rounds that were compared were not from George's rifle. Also, the bullets were compared with Lake Herman Road shooting with David and Betty Lou, and they also came up not a match.
However, it was the same brand as the Lake Herman Road shooting, which Zodiac later shows in his letter, Winchester Super X ammo. I don't really think that's groundbreaking, because in the canonicals later on we do see the Zodiac changing firearms. In my opinion, this is just another case of the changing of firearms. Perhaps 2 different .22 long rifles. And Brian and I have gone back and forth on his opinion on whether that's what was used at this crime scene, a .22 long rifle as per Baker, or the pistol that can fire 22 long rounds. Of course, there's the expended matches that Brian and I spoke about, the ammunition boxes, which are empty ammunition boxes, TL21 lot number, which of course was the Winchester Western Super X ammunition that Zodiac later mentions in the canonical crimes in his first letter after the Blue Rock Springs attack. It was theorized by local PD likely to be from Vandenberg Air Force Base, the PX, or a local Santa Barbara ammunition shop. There was an exhausting search. They were not able to locate a matching lot number. However, as covered in J.B. Averitt's series, which you should all go check out, his 5-part short film on the case, that it may have been sold in a battle pack, which Brian and I were discussing last night, is a large bulk ammunition order, in which case if it's a certain size of rounds, it's not going to have the individual lot number stamps or the price tags tagged on it. 15 empty .22 shell casings found toward the mouth of the creek, 20 feet from the ocean, which is right about here behind the camera, thought to be fired from a fast automatic weapon. 26 casings found total and empty boxes of 22 ammo. As I said, the unused rope of old type clothesline, which I previously mentioned. We were just theorizing it'd be interesting to see if there could be touch DNA, if the killer and or the Zodiac ever handled it before the putting on the gloves at the crime here. Sheriff Webster and Inspector Taylor speculated the assailant was bleeding when fleeing the scene. We do have those articles about, you know, the wounded killer theory. Rocks were pulled with blood splatter and sent to Ray Pinker, LAPD forensic chemist expert for analysis, who was on his way to a convention speaking in Nevada when he got pulled into this crime. And this is essentially, you know, the creek bed here where those rocks would have been pulled from that you guys would seen. Footprints with the shoe size being known to PD but unreleased. Think perhaps maybe a Lake Berryessa parallel, again speculating. And according to my source, there's more evidence that is unreleased. We will place the Carpenter press release for you guys to see here.
And Ross, I really want to say that there's just so many things that match up with the Zodiac Killer. And like you said earlier, Lake Berryessa is a big thing. There's so many things that are consistent. I'm really thinking that this is a pre-Zodiac killing.
So this is my theory here, is it's the dry run where the Zodiac is not able to live his fantasy that he thinks that he pulls off at Lake Berryessa. We'll cover that on that episode, but it just seems like, you know, maybe he was aiming for a knife crime here and things go wrong, he loses control. You guys can judge for yourself and tell us in the comments. The aftermath, everything that happens after the crime scene. June 10th, sheriff announces nearly 40 people questioned with 4 detectives working the case. Sheriff Webster was working the Vern Charles Smith murder from the day before, June 3rd, and was looking for the suspect, Sandy. On June 12th in the media, the sheriff announces the investigation is zeroing in and centered on the ammunition. Western Super X 22 caliber long rifle rounds, lot TL21, Winchester brand, which Detective Baker later adds. June 13th, the Lompoc Record offers a $1,000 reward for any information relating to the crime or the suspect. The same day, a sketch of suspect Sandy is released in the Record. The boxes of bullets left at the scene were believed to have originated at Vandenberg Air Force Base due to the base selling that lot number locally. However, the price stickers not being on the boxes may point to the boxes coming out of what was known as a battle pack, or brick of quantity coming in one large package. Office of Special Investigations from the base joins the investigation. Ballistics showed that only one weapon was used in the crime. An attempt was made to trace manufacturer's numbers on empty boxes of the .22 ammo found near the shack, per Inspector Taylor. June 19th, reports are made known of an active sniper in the area before the attack on Bobby and Linda, reported by James L. Summer. He and his son and his friends were shot at by 2 bullets from the train tracks up here, close enough to hear the bullets whistling in the air past them. This event took place on June 2nd, 1963. Several teens said a sniper fired several shots at them while surfing, but they could not see the shooter. There was another report of shot fired in an additional area as well, as Brian stated earlier. The sheriff announces a Santa Barbara store which sold the same ammunition lot number. Sheriff Department asks anyone owning Winchester Super X 22 caliber long rifle marked lot number TL21 inside the box to contact Sheriff Jim Weber immediately. 2 men report being in the shack shortly before the murders and having 2 shots fired at them from the railroad tracks. The next year, Sheriff Webster connects the crime to the Swindle newlyweds couple in 1964. The LA Times quoted the crimes were considered related by law enforcement, as we mentioned in episode 1 for the ballistics test. Ballistics showed it was not the same firearm used in the 2 murders. In 1970, the case was assigned to cold case detective William Baker, who started around 1972 and worked the case until 1991. SFPD Inspector Bill Armstrong called Baker to say that he feels Berryessa and Gaviota are linked. Baker believed the Zodiac was responsible for the crime. In '72, Sheriff Carpenter announced there was a strong link to the Zodiac. After the crime, the Lompoc High School changed the senior ditch day to a formally sponsored chaperoned event. This crime spree ensues between these two young teenagers, J.C. Reed and James Coleman, and they meet up with this third character, the infamous character in Zodiac world known as Sandy. They essentially embark on a crime spree in the days leading up to the Vern Charles Smith murder. So what happens is, according to Reed and Coleman, they encounter Sandy on the Santa Cruz boardwalk. They share some drinks of milk with him when he asks for one of the drinks, and they tell him that they stole it from a nearby YMCA building. The three then conspire to go back and break into the building through an open window, and using some keys they found for a locked cabinet, steal some sandwiches, which they hide under the boardwalk. Later on that night, they end up breaking into 59-year-old Nellie Harris's house at 529 Chestnut Street. They force their way in and search her purse for $20 in small change. After stealing a either 59 or 60 model Sunbeam convertible, which they found the keys in, they drive back down to Lompoc to see Reed's mother, who is a waitress at a restaurant. When they go into that restaurant to eat, they encounter Vern Smith, who they are told by Reed's mother is known to carry a lot of cash. So after going in the bathroom, they conspire together to beat up and rob Vern Smith to take him for whatever cash they can find on him. And then that's how the events of June 3rd that night ensue. So the plan that they go with is to follow him back to his trailer and claim to get him to help with their car, which is stalled. So according to the other two, Sandy goes up to the door of the trailer. He's able to wake up Smith and get him to come out, and tells him that they're having car trouble and that is stalled. So he agrees to take them to a gas station and fill up a spare gas can. When they come back and Smith has his back turned, filling up the gas can, supposedly Sandy takes out the pocket knife out of his pocket and stabs him in the back. He's apparently laughing while stabbing, and the articles called him a laughing killer, although these quotes are mostly attributed to Coleman and Reed, saying this is how the events transpire. So Smith supposedly said, "What the hell is going on?" before he falls face forward to the ground to his death with the knife in his back. J.C. Reed, nicknamed Benny, and Coleman end up going through the overalls of the body, taking out $360 cash, which they mostly split between each other. However, they give $20 to Sandy. After driving away, leaving the scene, they claim that Sandy was acting weird, and they claim that they weren't comfortable with him sitting behind them in the car with the knife, so they ask him for the knife, which they later end up throwing the knife and Smith's wallet into the brush. They drop him off at the Arroyo Grande Motel with the $20, and they continue driving north, where Coleman and Reed go to a different motel. There, they are heard trying to purchase ammunition for a .22 long caliber firearm. The hotel worker becomes suspicious and calls Santa Cruz PD, who comes and arrests them. They are separated when they give their statements in detention. Cause of death for the Vern Smokey Charles Smith murder is a 3/4 inch laceration of the aorta, causing massive internal hemorrhage. The evidence recovered is the yellow-handled pocket knife with no fingerprints or blood on it, and Smith's wallet, as well as the fatigue jacket and pants supposedly worn by Sandy, which he claimed to have stolen, with the name Bob Kaufman written inside the label. They also have the Sunbeam convertible, which you would think would have fingerprints from all three of the teenagers in question. The final outcome, both Reed and Coleman are sentenced to second-degree murder and conspiracy for robbery. The court does throw the book at them and try them as adults when they're sentenced to felony murder and sent to the Chino, California Institute for Men. So we gave you guys suspects last episode. We're going to give you suspects again this time. Starting with the main one, George Gill, 6 feet tall, 160-pound transient beachcomber. He built and lived in the shack for years on and off in isolation. He was questioned and picked up in October on a warrant for his arrest, obtained in addition to be wanted for pawning stolen guns in San Francisco. Originally thought to be named Clyde, that name was later discounted by law enforcement. He took a polygraph, which was inconclusive, but his alibi was verified that he was working in Santa Clara on the date of the attack. He was also looked at as a suspect in the Swindle murder, which was our episode 1. You guys should check that out if you haven't seen it. Robert Lee Bell, age 17. He was expelled from school from fighting, and he had scratches on his arms, which he said were from his puppy. He stole a .22 caliber revolver from rancher Roy Bland 4 days before the murders and a rifle. He said that he picked up his check at the car wash, which he worked June 1st, and then fled to Sacramento 2 days before June 4th. After lying about stealing the pistol, the guns were checked from comparison with the Gaviota Beach murders and were not a match. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall, 198 pounds. He denied any involvement and told detectives that he did not know the victims. The infamous Sandy, aka Robert Kaufman or William Carr, depending upon the aliases he used on the clothing found and the name he used to check into the motel. He is the supposed murderer of Vern Smith that was ruled out by detectives interviewing people matching this description. Described as stocky and wore black framed horn rimmed glasses, 5'8", about 150 pounds, wears his pants low, blonde, unbleached hair combed forward and blue eyes, and held his cigarettes close to the base of his fingers. A Newport Beach resident alerted authorities he matched the wanted description, and he was armed with a .22 caliber rifle. While in Orange County Juvenile Hall, he is questioned by 2 Santa Ana detectives for almost 2 days and cleared in all 3 of the murders. So if you believe that, I believe that there was more than one person of Sandy's matching description who was interviewed by these detectives. So if you believe that any of those people was the actual Sandy who met up with Coleman and Reed, then we're not going to make a big deal about Sandy anymore, people. I'm even going to go further on this Zodiac Files information and say that not only do I think that the Vern Smith murder has nothing to do with Domingos Edwards, we don't even know that Sandy was even at the Vern Smith murder, because that's just what Coleman and Reed said in their deposition. So if you read the trial transcript, Sandy is tried as a unapprehended John Doe. However, according to these newspaper articles that we'll insert here, and I've never heard anyone else talk about this other than the Zodiac Files, Sandy was actually cleared by Santa Ana detectives. So I think we can close the case on Sandy's, guys. I highly doubt that he's the Zodiac. His description is too small, he's too young, and probably had nothing to do with the Domingos Edward murders or the Vern Smith murder. Prime suspect pick for the Gaviota Beach murders. How about the Zodiac Killer? We haven't talked much about the Zodiac yet in this series, the Zodiac Files, but I think this has all the hallmarks of a Zodiac attack. Of course, revisiting the Slaves in Paradise letter, the by gun, by knife, by rope, by fire are all present at the attack due to the expended shell casings, the cut to Linda's bathing suit top, the expended matches found by the shack, and also the pre-cut lengths of rope left over at the scene, much like Lake Berryessa, where Inspector Taylor called Detective Baker and felt that both Berryessa and Gaviota were linked. Detective Baker did think that the Zodiac was responsible for the Gaviota Beach murders. And of course, in 1974, Sheriff Webster says that that there's a strong link to the Zodiac Killer in this case. The Zodiac Files Episode 4 Shoutouts. Have you ever had a question about religion, mythology, literature, film, movies, comedy? You need to head over to the Stones Unturned podcast, hosted by Professor Thomas Henry Horan. Subscribe to that here, author of The Myth of the Zodiac Hoax. Also, Black Box Online Radio. Ned DeHaan is the man. He promoted a bunch of our stuff, including the Planet X comic that we dropped. Go subscribe to Black Box Online Radio here. Ever had any question about any true crime case ever? I mean any true crime case ever. Go subscribe to Black Box Online Radio. Also, shout out to The Gray Stage, everybody covering the Crowley case. Shout out to Greg, Dan, Sophia, Catherine, everybody at The Gray Stage. Go subscribe to them here. And if you want to read the police reports, go buy this. Guys, the donation button below in the link tree works. Give it a try if you want to support the channel. Where do you think we're headed next time in episode 5? Leave your prediction below. Like, subscribe, share. Tune in next time on the Zodiac Files.